the Kovanni warship called the Iron Fang moved slowly through the darkness of space, its black metal hull cutting through the starlight like a blade. Thrusil Commander Zethrak stood on the bridge with his 4 yellow eyes fixed on the small human vessel they had just disabled with a single shot from their plasma cannons. The human ship was tiny and old, and looked like it might fall apart if someone breathed on it too hard. "Bring me the survivor," Zethrak ordered, his voice echoing through the bridge as his mandibles clicked together with anticipation. The Kovanni were a proud species who had conquered dozens of worlds across the galaxy, and they saw humans as nothing more than soft, weak creatures who had somehow stumbled into space travel by accident. 2 guards dragged the human onto the bridge and threw him down on the cold metal floor. He was an older man with gray hair and a lined face that showed his years. His clothes were simple and worn, and he looked like he had not slept well in days. His name, according to the ship records, was Daniel Cole, and he claimed to be a retired cargo hauler who had gotten lost on his way to a trading station. Zethrak walked in a slow circle around the human, studying him the way a predator studies wounded prey. "You are an unrestricted space human," the commander said, his translated voice harsh and mechanical through the speakers. "The Kovanni Dominion does not allow your kind in this sector, and the penalty for trespassing is severe." Daniel looked up from the floor with tired gray eyes that showed no fear, which Zethrak found slightly annoying. "I apologize, Commander," Daniel said in a quiet voice. "My navigation computer had a malfunction, and I drifted off course while I was sleeping. A convenient story. It is the truth." Zethrak gestured to one of his guards, who stepped forward and struck Daniel across the face with the back of his armored hand. The human fell sideways, and blood began to drip from a cut on his cheek, but he made no sound of pain. He simply pushed himself back up to his knees and looked at the commander again with those same calm gray eyes. "We have captured many humans in this region," Zethrak continued. "All of them claimed to be lost travelers or traders or tourists, and all of them were lying. I am not a spy if that is what you are suggesting. Then what are you? Just an old man who made a mistake." The commander leaned down until his face was inches from Daniel's, and he could smell the strange scent that all humans carried. "We shall see about that," Zethrak said softly. "Take him to the holding cells and begin interrogation at the next cycle." The guards grabbed Daniel by the arms and hauled him to his feet, and as they dragged him toward the door, he did not struggle or protest. He simply walked between them with his head down like a man who had already accepted his fate. Thrak watched him go with a feeling of satisfaction, because breaking humans was one of his favorite activities, and this one would be no different from the others. Down in the intelligence section of the ship, a young analyst named Prethen was running the standard security checks on their new prisoner. He scanned the human's face and fingerprints and ran them through every database the Dominion maintained on human citizens and military personnel. The results came back empty. No criminal record, and no military service, and no intelligence flags. Daniel Cole appeared to be exactly what he claimed to be, which was a nobody from a nowhere planet who had made a stupid mistake. Prethen was about to close the file and move on to other work when something made him pause. There was something about the human's eyes in the security footage that bothered him most. Prisoners showed fear or anger or desperation when they were captured, but this man had shown nothing at all. His face had been completely blank, like a mask hiding whatever was underneath. On a whim, Prethen decided to run the biometric data through the restricted archives that required special clearance to access. These were the files that contained information about the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy and the threats that the Dominion preferred to keep secret from its own citizens. Entered his access codes and waited as the system searched through millions of classified records. The screen flickered once, and then a single file appeared. It was bordered in red, which was the Kovanni color for extreme danger and the highest threat level in there. classification system. Prethen felt his hearts begin to beat faster as he opened the file. Inside was a photograph that matched their prisoner perfectly, along with a single human name and a designation that made his blood turn to ice in his veins. The name was not Daniel Cole. The designation was one word that every Corvani officer learned to fear during their training. ReaperHFY stared at the screen for a long moment as the reality of the situation sank into his mind. They had captured the most dangerous human who had ever lived, and they had thrown him into a standard holding cell like he was a common criminal. He jumped up from his chair and began running toward the commander's quarters, because Zethrak needed to know about this immediately. Every second that passed was a second closer to disaster, because the Reaper did not get captured by accident. The Reaper did not make mistakes. If he was on this ship, then it was because he wanted to be on this ship, and that meant something terrible was about to happen. The name that echoed Prethen burst into Commander Zethrak's quarters without waiting for permission to enter, which was a serious violation of military protocol. The commander was eating his evening meal, and he looked up with anger flashing in his 4 yellow eyes at the interruption. This had better be worth your life, analyst. Zethrak growled as he set down his food. Commander, the human prisoner. Prethen gasped while trying to catch his breath. I ran his face through the restricted archives. And what did you find that is so important you would disturb my meal? Prethen transferred the file to the commander's personal display and watched as Zethrak began to read. The change that came over the commander's face was immediate and terrifying. All 4 of his eyes went wide, and the color drained from his skin, and his mandibles stopped moving entirely for a long moment. Zethrak simply stared at the screen, as if he was hoping the words would change if he looked at them long enough. This cannot be real. The commander whispered, I verified it 3 times, Commander, and the biometric match is perfect. Zethrak stood up so fast that his chair fell over behind him with a loud crash. How many crew members have had contact with the prisoner? He demanded. The boarding team of 4 and the guards who brought him to the bridge and the 2 guards who took him to the holding cell. Seal all information about this immediately, and no one else learns the truth until I give direct authorization. Zethrak was already moving toward the door with his hand on his sidearm. Commander, Prethen called out. What is the Reaper exactly, because I only know the name from rumors. The commander stopped at the doorway and turned around with an expression that Prethen had never seen on his face before. Was fear, pure and simple fear. From a Corvani warrior who had fought in dozens of battles and never shown weakness. 60 years ago, the Dominion believed that humans were a weak species. Zethrak began. We thought they would be easy to conquer, so we invaded one of their colonies called Vega Prime. I remember reading about that in the history texts. The texts do not tell the full story. The commander continued. We took the colony easily, and we killed many civilians to send a message to their Federation government. What happened next? 2 days after we secured the planet, a single human infiltrated our command structure, and he moved through our defenses like a ghost. In the night, Zethrak paused, and his voice dropped lower. By morning, every Corvani officer above the rank of lieutenant was dead, including 3 generals who had come to oversee the occupation. Prethen felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm temperature of the ship. 1 human killed all of them. He asked. 47 officers in a single night, and he left their bodies arranged in a circle in the main plaza with a single word carved into the ground next to them. What word? Remember. The commander turned back toward the door. We call him Reaper because he harvests death the way farmers harvest grain, and in 60 years. He has never stopped. But that would make him very old by now. He was in his 30s during Vega Prime, so he would be in his 90s now, but the file has been updated 17 times since then. Zethrak's voice was grim. Every time we believed he was retired or dead, he would appear again, and more Corvani would die in impossible ways. And now he is sitting in our holding cell. No, the commander said. Now he has allowed us to put him in our holding cell, and that is a very different thing. An alarm suddenly blared through the corridor, making both Corvani jump. The sound was harsh and urgent, and it meant that something had gone very wrong somewhere on the ship. Zeth checked his communicator, and his face went pale. What is it, Commander? Holding cell 9. Zethrak said slowly. The door has just been opened from the inside. That is impossible, because those cells are designed to contain the most dangerous prisoners in the galaxy. Apparently, they were not designed to contain him. The two Corvani looked at each other as the alarm continued to scream, and somewhere deep in the ship, the lights in one corridor flickered and went dark. The Reaper was free. The hunt had begun, but this time the Corvani were not the hunters. They were the Praeseth. Grabbed Prethan by the shoulder and pulled him toward the bridge, because that was the most secure location on the ship. Contact High Command immediately, the commander ordered. Tell them we need emergency extraction, and tell them who we have on board. Will they send help in time? I do not know, but I do know that if the Reaper wanted us dead, we would already be corpses. Then what does he want? That is exactly what I intend to find out. They ran through the corridors as more alarms began to sound throughout the ship, and crew members rushed past them with weapons drawn and fear in their eyes. The Reaper was loose on the Iron Fang, and nothing would ever be the same again. The ghost walks the lights in Corridor 7 died without warning, and Guard Captain Morath drew his weapon as darkness swallowed everything around him. Get the backup power running now, he shouted into his communicator. We are trying, Captain, but something is interfering with the systems, came the nervous reply from engineering. The interference is coming from inside the ship. Morath gestured for his squad of 6 guards to form up behind him in standard defensive formation. They had all heard the rumors about who was loose on the ship, and they were all trying very hard not to let their fear show. Stay calm and stay together, Morath ordered. He's just one human, and there are 7 of us. The words sounded hollow even as he spoke them, because everyone knew that numbers meant nothing against the Reaper. Sound came from somewhere ahead of them in the darkness, and it was soft like a whisper of cloth against metal. Morath fired his plasma rifle twice, and the blue-white bolts lit up the corridor for brief moments. In the first flash he saw nothing but empty hallway. In the second flash he caught a glimpse of something moving, but it was gone before his brain could process what he had seen. Then his weapon was no longer in his hands, and something struck him at the base of his skull with perfect precision. Last thing Morath heard before unconsciousness took him was a quiet voice speaking flawless Corvani. You should have checked the passenger manifest more carefully. On the bridge of the Iron Fang, Commander Zethrak watched the security monitors with growing horror as camera after camera went dark. Feeds were not being destroyed or damaged. They were simply being turned off one by one, as if someone was walking through the ship flipping switches. How many guards have we lost contact with? He demanded. 23 in the last 6 minutes, Commander, the tactical officer reported. Biometric monitors show they are all alive, but unconscious. That detail made Zethrak's blood run cold. A killer who left bodies was making a statement about his power. A killer who left survivors was sending a message about his mercy. The Reaper was telling them that he could kill every single one of them, but he was choosing not to do so. Seal the bridge with maximum security protocols, Zethrak ordered. Nothing gets through those doors. Should we evacuate the ship, Commander? And go where exactly? Zethrak replied. We are 3 days from the nearest Dominion outpost, and our shuttle cannot outrun his anger. The lights on. The bridge flickered once, and every Corvani present drew their weapons and pointed them at the shadows. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow that made the bridge look like it was painted in blood. Then a voice came from the speakers, and it was calm and patient and almost gentle. Commander Zethrak, everyone on the bridge, jumped and looked around, trying to find the source of the sound. "I know you are listening to me." The voice continued. "I know you have read my file by now, and I know you are afraid." Zethrak forced his voice to remain steady, even though his hearts were pounding. "What do you want, human?" 3 months ago, a Corvani raiding party attacked a research station in the Tau Ceti system, and they took prisoners, including scientists and civilians. The Dominion takes many prisoners, and I do not know the details of that raid. Then I suggest you find someone who does. The voice said, and there was a slight edge to it now. Among those prisoners was a woman named Laura Bennett. I do not know that name. She is 34 years old with brown hair and green eyes, and she has a small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. The voice paused. She is also pregnant with her first child. Silence fell over the bridge as the weight of those words sank in. You have 1 hour to provide me with her exact location and confirm that she is alive and unharmed. The Reaper continued, and if we refuse, I have disabled 47 of your crew without killing anyone because I am being polite right now. The voice grew harder. If you do not give me what I want, then I will stop being polite and you will learn why the Dominion gave me my name. The communication cut off and the bridge was silent except for the hum of the Anganesith. Rak turned to his crew and saw the terror written on every face. Find that prisoner manifest and search every database we have access to, he ordered. I want to know everything about Laura Bennett, and I want to know it now. Commander, what if High Command refuses to give us the information? Then we are all dead. Zethrak said simply, because that voice was not making a threat. He looked at the darkened corridors on the security monitors where the Reaper was waiting somewhere in the million shadows. That voice was making a promise. The weight of a name. 53 minutes into the deadline, Commander Zethrak finally received a response from Dominion High Command. The message was marked with the highest security classification, and it had taken 3 different admirals to authorize its release. Laura Bennett was alive. She was being held at detention facility 12 on the moon orbiting the Corvani homeworld itself, according to the file. She had been identified as the wife of a human intelligence operative and was being kept as a potential bargaining chip for future negotiations. High Command did not know whose wife she actually was. If they had known, they would have released her immediately and sent her home with an armed escort and a formal apology. I have your answer, Zethrak said into the open communication channel. The bridge was completely silent, and every officer was holding their breath as they waited for the response. The Reaper's voice returned through the speakers, still calm and controlled. I am listening. Commander, the woman is alive, and she is being held in Facility 12 on the moon of our homeworld. What is her current condition? The records indicate she has not been harmed because she is considered a valuable asset for intelligence purposes. There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever. You are telling me the truth, the Reaper said finally. I can hear it in your voice patterns. What happens now, human? Now I leave your ship and your crew in peace, but first I have a message for your High Command. Zethrak felt a knot forming in his stomach because he knew this message would not be pleasant. In exactly 72 hours, Facility 12 will no longer exist. The Reaper continued. Every prisoner currently held there will be freed, and every guard who stands in my way will regret that choice. You cannot threaten the Dominion homeworld. One of the bridge officers shouted, I am not making a threat. The voice replied, I am providing information so that your leaders can make informed decisions. And if Laura Bennett has been harmed, then I will not stop at the facility. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Zethrak thought about the 60 years of reports in the Reaper's file and all the impossible things this one human had accomplished. He thought about Vega Prime, where 47 officers had died in a single night. He thought about the admiral who had been found with his throat cut in a locked room surrounded by 500 guards. He thought about all the times the Dominion had believed the Reaper was finally dead, only to watch him appear again, like a nightmare that refused to end. "Who are you really?" Zethrak asked. "Not the name in the file, but who are you underneath all of this?" There was another pause, and then something unexpected. Reaper laughed softly. "I am nobody's special commander," he said. "I am just a man who made a promise to a woman many years ago." "What promise?" "I promised her that no matter where she went, and no matter what happened, I would always find her. And I would always bring her home. And the things you have done over the years were all for this woman. The Dominion drew first blood at Vega Prime when your soldiers killed innocent civilians to make a political statement." The voice grew quieter. "I simply made sure that you understood the cost of that choice." Zethrak found himself feeling something he had not expected, which was a strange kind of respect. This human had spent 60 years waging a one-man war against an empire, not for power or glory or revenge, but because he loved someone and would do anything to protect her. "Your wife must be an extraordinary woman," the commander said. "She is a scientist who joined that research station because she believed in exploration and discovery and the best qualities that both our species could achieve." There was pain in the voice now. "Your people took her because she married me, and they did not even know what they had done. We did not know. You know now, and I expect you to make sure everyone else knows as well." The lights on the bridge returned to normal, and every system came back online at the same moment. Sensor sweep showed nothing unusual, and there was no human life sign anywhere on the ship. He was gone. As Zethrak slumped back in his command chair, feeling exhausted in a way he had never experienced before. "Commander, what do we do now?" one of his officers asked. "We send the message to High Command exactly as he instructed. They will never abandon Facility 12 just because one human made a threat." Zethrak looked at the officer with something like pity in his eyes. "Then Facility 12 will burn, and everyone in High Command knows it, even if they refuse to admit it publicly." He turned to face the viewing port and stared out at the stars. "The Reaper does not make empty threats," Zethrak said quietly. "In 60 years, he has never failed to keep a promise, and he will not fail now." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances, but no one argued because they all knew their commander was right. Somewhere out there in the darkness, between the stars, a human ship was already racing toward them. Kalvani homeworld and the Dominion could do nothing but wait and pray that their leaders would be wise enough to let the prisoners go, but Zethrak knew they would not, because pride had always been the greatest weakness of his people. They would fight and they would lose, and the galaxy would learn once again why humans were not to be underestimated. The Reaper's promise. 71 hours after the Reaper left the Iron Fang detention facility, 12 ceased to exist as a functioning military installation. The attack came without warning when a small human ship dropped out of hyperspace inside the defensive perimeter, which was supposed to be impossible. The maneuver should have destroyed both the ship and its pilot, but somehow the vessel survived and landed on the facility grounds before a single alarm could be triggered. Security footage from that night would become the most classified material in Corvani history, and the few officers who were allowed to view it would never speak of what they saw. A single figure moved through corridors filled with armed soldiers, and he passed through them like water flowing around stones. Guards who tried to stop him found themselves unconscious on the floor before they could pull their triggers. Officers who called for reinforcements discovered that their communications had been cut. Doors that should have been locked opened at his touch, and security systems that should have detected him showed nothing but empty hallways. Reaper moved through the facility in 47 minutes, and in that time, he disabled over 200 guards and freed 93 prisoners from their cells. Not a single Corvani died that night, but every one of them would remember the fear they felt when they woke up and realized what had happened. Laura Bennett was found at a Federation medical station 2 days later, along with the other freed prisoners, she was thin and tired and badly in need of rest, but she was alive and unharmed. Just as her husband had demanded, the doctors told her she had a visitor, and she looked up as the door to her room opened. He stood in the doorway, looking nothing like the legend the galaxy feared. It was just a man with gray hair and tired eyes, and a face that showed every one of his 90 years. He was not the Reaper in that moment. He was just Daniel Cole, the man she had married on a rainy afternoon in Seattle 25 years ago. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey yourself," she replied, and her voice cracked with emotion. "You came for me. I always come for you," he said as he walked across the room and took her hand in his. "I promised you, remember. The news feeds are calling you. A terrorist, and the Dominion is demanding that the Federation hand you over. Let them demand whatever they want. Daniel, you cannot fight an entire empire by yourself." He smiled at her, and it was a real smile that reached his tired gray eyes. "I am not fighting an empire, Lara," he said gently. "I am just bringing my wife home." He reached out and placed his hand carefully on her stomach, where their child was growing inside her. "Both of you." She began to cry then, and the tears flowed freely down her cheeks as all the fear and pain of the last 3 months finally released itself. He held her close and said nothing because words were not needed between them later. When she was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, Daniel stood at the window of the medical station and watched the stars. His communicator buzzed with incoming messages, and he knew, without looking, that they would be demands from politicians and requests from journalists and threats from the Kolvani government. He deleted them all without reading a single one. Let the galaxy tell its stories about the Reaper, and let the Dominion fear a ghost that hunted them in the darkness. Let the politicians argue about what his actions meant for relations between humans and Corvan, and none of that mattered to Daniel Cole. What mattered was the woman sleeping behind him, and the child she carried, and the simple truth that had driven him for 60 years. Had been a young soldier when the Dominion attacked Vega Prime, and he had watched helplessly as his friends and neighbors were slaughtered by alien invaders. He had made a choice that day to become something more than human, and something less at the same time. He became the Reaper, because someone had to remind the galaxy that humans were not prey to be hunted. Someone had to teach the Dominion that every action had consequences, and every innocent life taken would be answered with justice. And now, 60 years later, he was still keeping that promise, even though his body was old, and his bones ached, and his hands were not as steady as they used to be. He would keep fighting until his last breath, because that was who he was. That was what it meant to be human. Humans protect their own, and they never stop, and they never give up. And they never forget. The Corvani had learned that lesson at Vega Prime, and they had learned it again at Facility 12, and if they ever forgot, Daniel Cole would be there to remind them. He turned away from the window and walked back to sit beside his sleeping wife. The galaxy could call him whatever names it wanted, monster or hero or terrorist or legend. He did not care about any of that. Was just a man who loved his wife and who would burn down empires to keep her safe. And that was the most human thing of all. The end.